Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of HCS Matters. I'm John Wright, Public Relations Director for Hardin County Schools, and of course money is always a topic of discussion in any organization, but especially in a school district. And so we're here today with John Stith, who is our Chief Operations Officer, and John is also within that. John, you wear many hats. You're over transportation, you're over child nutrition, buildings and grounds, and all that good stuff, but you're also the keeper of the checkbook.
True. There's a lot going on in this district, John.
Well, let's talk about, before we get into the topic of money. Operations does carry a full load. So just talk about some of the things that you're kind of over.
Oh, sure. You've kind of mentioned the major areas, but maintenance, transportation, food service, and of course finance. All those support areas, the kind of behind the scenes stuff that has to happen so that the teachers can do a great job in the classroom, right, so that kids get to school safely every day.
And you have some great directors in those positions, and great staff.
Absolutely, and this is not a one-man show, and we have a lot of great people, not just directors, but cook bakers, maintenance folks, bus garage workers, that they all do a great job.
Mm-hmm. So in the area of finance, the budget making process is really kind of an all year process, or a good chunk of the year process, because there are phases to how we make a budget. So walk us through how you make a budget.
Sure. And it is kind of cyclical, so there's really no one place you can start, but we'll just start with kind of our fiscal year. We'll do what they call our working budget in September. And that's where we finally have a pretty good idea of what our enrollment's going to be and things of that nature. So that's when we kind of finalize what are we actually going to spend in the year we're at. Then we kind of move into already start planning for the next year in December. And that's when we do what we call a draft budget. And that's name's pretty good, because at that point in time we still, if it's a year that our legislators are meeting, we don't know exactly what they're going to do, so it's just kind of a draft. We look at kind of where we've been, and if we have any new big thing on the horizon or some challenges that we may be facing, we start planning on those, and the board looks at it then. Then fast forward to May, and that's when we try to take the draft budget and narrow it down as close as we can to what we think next year is going to bring. So we'll do the tentative budget in May, and then it all circles back around to September when we do the working budget again for that actual school year.
Well, and let's clear something up. It's not John Stith and Jessica Annis, who's our Director of Finance, making the budget. It is our Board of Education is ultimate. They vote on that budget, and everything still runs through the Board of Education.
Absolutely. Everything we do, everything that gets proposed, all the reports, and we have a pretty elaborate accounting program called Munis, which can drive you crazy sometimes. But all that data gets put in there. It goes out to departments. It comes back, gets put in that system, and then we present that to the board. So it's a fairly extensive process.
When you do that, talk about some of the challenges that you run into in the budget making process.
Well, of course, we're not like any other family. We have a budget, and we do our best to stick to that budget. But unfortunately, sometimes, like a family may have, where an engine gets blown out, or all of a sudden maybe something happened to the roof and it's leaking, and you really weren't planning on those things. You've got to find money to take care of those items, and so we have 21 buildings and 3,000 employees, so we do have situations where we have things that we don't plan on that we have to take care of. And really, to compound that, lately I'd say within the last decade, we've really experienced some challenges, kind of like everybody else has, with not having really all the resources that we need from the state to provide things that we like to provide for staff and students.
Well, and we'll get into those here in just a second. But there is every dollar that comes in is kind of designated. It falls into different pots, whether that be money that whether that be the hamburger that you buy on Friday night at the football game, whether that be money that comes in from the state or maybe the federal government or whatever. Talk about how we have different pots of money, and those are restricted to certain budgetary items that we have to purchase.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of times you hear a common concern or thought is, hey, why are you building a building, but yet I hear you're cutting this program, or you're not giving raises this year, or whatever it may be. And you're exactly right. There are, a host of different funds in that accounting program that we talked about. And as money comes in from the federal government, that money's highly restricted. For example, for the food service program, we can't take that money and then go hire teachers with it. We have to spend it on food service. And as part of the SEEK formula, some of the local dollars that we raise, part of that money gets put in a building fund. It's actually called Fund 360, and that money is strictly used for buildings. You can't take that money and go hire a teacher with it. You can't take that money and send kids on field trip. That money is for building buildings. And of course, there's what they call the general fund. That is a rather, biggest part of our budget. That's what we use to pay for buses and teacher salaries and aides and custodians and principals and things of that nature. And then there's also, other pots of money that gets raised at the school. We have a great, wonderful booster programs throughout the district, and they raise monies, and those monies get spent on student programs. So I could talk for probably 30 minutes on all the different pots, and we didn't hit on state grants, which is another area that can help the district for things like preschool and extended school, after school tutoring. But as you mentioned, every dollar that comes in typically has a pot that it goes into, and there's a purpose for that pot.
Well, you touched on it a little bit. A lot of people have told me, well, you guys are always building something, remodeling something, and it's not because we've got some extra money. Let's give a facelift to Central Hardin, or let's give a facelift to New Highland Elementary. That we're not just doing that just for the thrill of spending money, are we?
No, absolutely not. We have probably 25 facilities. And growing up in Hardin County, I'll be honest, I did not realize that until I kind of got in this role. I grew up kind of on the northwestern side of the county, and that's what I was familiar with. Ronnieville, Vine Grove. That side of the world. Until you drive Hardin County, it's a big county.
It is.
And we have lots of facilities. And, if we just worked on one facility a year, it would take us over 20 years before we got to every single facility.
That's right.
And when you start thinking of it in terms like that, all of a sudden it kind of makes sense why we're doing some sort of project just about every year.
And there are going to be needs, and say 2020 is, and I'm making this up, say 2020 is Creekside Elementary's turn, but then the air conditioner goes out at Meadowview, then all of a sudden your attention has to go back to Meadowview.
Yeah, like everybody, we sometimes have those unfortunate surprises that catch us, and every system has a life cycle. As probably in your own home, your air conditioner, you'd love it to last forever, but eventually it's going to go out, and so we are no different. That happens to us as well.
And we're no different to everybody's utility bill goes up. We have to pay utility bills and things like that. So let's talk about we're not immune to those type of things.
No, as most folks know, your utility bill typically goes up a little bit every year. Ours does as well. Now, we do have green teams in all of our schools, and we have an energy manager that works really hard to try to look for ways to be as efficient as possible. But as you know, inflationary costs, we're not immune to that. So even though we try to be as efficient as we can, we still have to pay the increased water bill costs, the increased electrical costs, the increased cable and internet costs.
So let's talk about some of the things we do. I mean, when you look at the budget every year, I mean, you and Ms. Annis and your team, you guys have to look at ways maybe to cut spending, or we do that. I mean, this is not, we just don't spend. We look for ways to cut spending, and you touched on a little bit of that with the green teams and the energy manager.
Absolutely, and kind of look across the district. The first thing, obviously, if you have a school that maybe has an enrollment decline, they lose staff, and it's just kind of by formula. So staff kind of goes up and down depending on the number of students. We also look at our support staff. How many meals are we serving? If we're serving fewer meals, that's fewer staff. If we're serving more meals, then sometimes we have to add staff. So, we're constantly looking for ways to be as efficient as we can with the dollars that we do get. We look at renegotiating contracts. I know our energy manager's done a number of those, and actually have saved over $40,000 a year just renegotiating some of our utility contracts. So, constantly looking for ways to do more with what we have.
And you do, you multiply $40,000 a year times the rest of my career, your career, someone's lifetime. That's a lot of money that we're putting back in the bank or putting back in for students.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, we have to keep up with the quality of education. I mean, we have to offer. That's our service. That's what we offer is education. We have to keep up with. The changing trends in education. We have to keep up with the different instruction ways to provide instruction for students. Talk about how that is a priority when you sit down and work on the budget.
Oh, sure. Probably the thing in my mind that's most different today than certainly when I started in education back in '97 is the amount of money we spend on technology. You could say, well, the blackboard was good for me, so let's just put blackboard and chalk up. Well, that's not how people operate anymore today. We live in a much more fast-paced world, and doesn't seem like it's slowing down any. So, we buy Chrome carts for schools so teachers can differentiate their instruction in the classroom, and we have interactive boards that we put in for teachers to use and for students to interact with to enhance their learning. So. I'd say if you compared us today to say even a decade ago, we spend a lot more money today on technology than ever, and probably not going to slow down any.
Right, and we do that because when students get into the world, that's what they're going to operate with.
I mean, you can't even go. I mean, I went to McDonald's the other day, and they made me sign in on one of the marquees. So it is what it is.
Right. So we talked about this before, and we still use textbooks, even though it's a technology world. They're still learning from textbooks, and we have to buy those textbooks. We need to purchase those, but yet we receive $0. I mean, $0 from the Commonwealth of Kentucky on textbook money. So it's got to be a challenge.
Well, you talk about some of the things we face when we're dealing with the budget. That was a big one. And I commend the state. There for a while, they actually changed the name. It was called textbook. Talking about just what we were talking about, because that's typically what you went out and bought. You bought textbooks, and when you took science, you got a textbook, and that's what helped the teacher and the students kind of communicate. Well, they changed the name actually to instructional resources, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and kind of broaden what you could spend that money on. But then, unfortunately, in the last 2 budget cycles, they eliminated the funding. So imagine, 20 years ago to say you have no textbooks. That would almost be unheard of to say you don't get a textbook. But that's essentially what happened. Is that funding from the state was eliminated. So unfortunately, those different pots now. One of the pots has to pick up that expense, and so. It kind of is what it is, but we are doing our very best to still provide Chromebooks and textbooks and manipulatives for students to use. But we lost about $500,000 from the state by eliminating textbook and teacher training funding.
Right, and John, that's us. Well, a bigger district, and when you go into a smaller district, especially, I would think that makes an even bigger impact.
Well, when you're big, sometimes you can spread out the pain a little bit easier. So you're right. In a smaller district, that pain hits a lot harder. We can kind of spread that out a little bit better because we're bigger, but it still hurts.
It sure does. Also, something that we do not receive any money or assistance from the Commonwealth on is professional development, and our teachers have to have that. They have to keep up with changes in curriculum. They have to keep up with changes in instructional rigor and things like that, and trainings as far as safety trainings and things like that. We still have to provide that to be the best that we can for our students, and we receive, there's no money for that.
Well, yeah, again, we talked about those different pots of money. We used to get professional development, training money from the state, and that's been eliminated. Part of that $500,000 I was talking about. And you're absolutely right. You take a brand new teacher and expect them to be a master teacher coming right out of school. That's a lot to ask. I don't know of too many professionals that come out of college and immediately are a master at what they do. And so not to have that additional funding, it hurts, but are we still training teachers? Absolutely. But, again, we're having to go to a different pot of money now to find ways to do that.
And those professional developments and trainings are required. A good chunk of those are required by state law and district policy.
Absolutely. They removed the funding, but they didn't remove the requirement. And I'm glad they didn't remove the requirement, because we want our teachers to get better. We want them to be better this year than they were last year. But it's a budget challenge.
Now, eventually, you and I, in 20 years, you and I won't be sitting here anymore. Hopefully, I love my job, but I want to spend my golden years with family, and I know you do as well. But when we retire, as folks are retiring, which happens every year, folks who have given their lots of dedicated years to the district, for which we are appreciative, we have to provide a match for that, for those retirement funds, and those per Kentucky law, changes in Kentucky law, our contribution rate has gone up rather aggressively over the last 3 to 4 years.
Oh, that you talk about budget challenge. That's one of the bigger budget challenges we're currently facing. When I first started teaching, the districts didn't have to match any of my retirement. It was done at the state level. But now every school district has to match for certified staff 3% for their retirement rate. And that's only been within the last decade that's happened.
Now, a certified person is, define what a certified staff member is.
Sure, a certified person is somebody that's been trained typically in teaching. So it's your teachers, your counselors, your principals, folks that provide instruction, for lack of a better term, are typically what you'd think of as certified folks. The bigger hit actually has come on the classified side of the world, and while there's two different systems, I don't exactly know. That's just kind of how it was set up. But certified folks are put in one retirement system, and classified folks are put in another. And those folks are just as equally as important. Kind of we talked about earlier. They're the folks that a lot of times are doing stuff behind the scenes, so that teachers can teach and kids can learn. But we're talking about our bus drivers, our cook bakers, our custodians. There's a whole lot of folks out there that are in that classified retirement pool. That's the plan that has really dramatically changed. Just for example, I think you go back to around 2005, districts were contributing 8% into their retirement fund. This year alone, our district will be contributing 24% per dollar into that retirement fund, so 3 times the amount. So, that has dramatically gone up over the past decade for every school district in the state.
So that has risen dramatically, and what you will hear a lot from Frankfurt is that SEEK funding, or the formula that they use to pay us our per pupil expenses, is that it's the highest it's ever been, and that's true. But it has only gone up less than $200 in 10 years. So
that's very accurate. Yeah. So that's a nice headline, and it is true that SEEK funding is at its highest level. But in I think 2010-11, the per pupil base, what we got per child, the base amount was around $3,868. This coming year, it's $4,000. So that's more, but it's only $132 more. So that's only 3% increase over the past 9 years. And I can assure you that our electric bill has gone up more than that. We just talked about our benefit contributions have gone up more than that. So the amount of money we're receiving from the state is not keeping pace with our inflationary costs. I think the national average for inflation is about 2% a year. So if we're only getting a 3% increase in revenue, but inflationary costs have gone up 18% over that time frame, we're really losing ground.
So we've cried in our drink here for a little bit. So how are we doing it? How are we overcoming these obstacles and moving forward to provide what I believe and you believe in hopefully what this whole county believes is the best education we can possibly give to our students.
Sure. Well, and again, it kind of gets back to what we talked about before. It's been a team effort. There have been reductions that have been made all along the way. Unfortunately, we've had to share the pain. Our schools, we reduced the amount of money that we give to schools for them to operate on. We've reduced staff. We've tried to be more energy efficient where we can. We've renegotiated contracts. All the things that any business or any family would do when your amount of income you have is coming in relatively the same. You look for ways to be as efficient as you can. Have we had to eliminate some programs? We've had to do that. Have we had to reduce some services? We've had to do that. We just do what we have to do in order to get by.
And commending our board, they have been. They keep a watchful eye on this. If there's, we probably talk about the budget. If you go to a board meeting or watch it here on HCEC TV, you see a good portion of time is spent on budgetary type decisions. So our board is vigilant about our budget and spending.
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of one of the first things I noticed about this district. People talk to us sometimes about construction. The board very quickly jumps on any change order. If there's something comes in that has increased the project, they want to know everything is about it, why it's that way. So, they get it. They understand that we have limited amount of resources and they need to be spent wisely. So, I think our board does a good job of encouraging leadership to be efficient and effective. And then also, if it doesn't make sense, they don't do it.
We to stay competitive salary-wise, and salary, it's not a secret, that's the biggest outpouring of dollars, and we have to pay our staff. And but we've stayed competitive, but yet over the years have had some challenges with that. Talk about that.
Yeah, sure. That's always a difficult topic. Everybody works extremely hard in the district, and we certainly would like to pay our folks more than we do. But we are constrained by what we have that comes in, and I think we've tried to do things. We've given a 1% cost of living increase about 6 times over the past 10 years. Again, we're not quite keeping pace with inflation, but we are trying to show our employees that we value them and want to try to do something for them to give them a little bit more. But that it's just it is a real challenge. It's one of those that it seems like there's never enough money to give people the raise that they truly deserve. But by the same token, you got to kind of balance that with being efficient and being effective. So that's really a difficult topic.
Sure, and a lot of districts, especially again smaller districts, have a bigger problem swallowing that pill. And a lot of people, you hear in the news, especially here lately, that districts are having difficulty finding people, whether that be classified or certified people. Jefferson County has they have put up a lot of money to be able to hire people, but people have a choice of whether they want to work for us or want to work for anybody else, and sometimes they can make more money somewhere else. But we've tried our best to stay in that competitive range.
Well, and that's the real concern is when you're only given a 1% raise, or in some years we gave no raise, and other districts are giving raises, you worry that they're going to steal your staff. And that's really happened, especially you talk about technology changing. That's really changed. When I started in education, it would be unheard of to have an unfilled PE position, for example. And you're starting to see that now, where districts are not being able to find certified staff to fill teaching positions. We've kind of known for years there's been bus driver shortages and things of that nature, but now you're kind of seeing it across the board. And I know it seems like every street I drive on that has any business has a sign out now that says we're hiring. And so it's just a very competitive job market right now. And so when you're not providing those benefits and compensation to your employees, they can go other places. They don't have to come here. So.
Well, we got about 3 minutes left, so let's end on some positive notes. East Hardin is building a brand new school. We're building a brand new East Hardin. We're building a brand new Lincoln Trail. Kind of give us some updates on where we are with those projects.
Yeah. Real tickled with where we're at with Lincoln Trail. The construction manager team out there is called Alliance, and they are, from day one, they have been hitting it. Every time I go out there, there's stuff going on. So really tickled. They've got footers in for the main floor, and here pretty soon you'll start to see that building start rising out of the ground, as they say. So that's it's very exciting. East Hardin is just a little bit behind. Lincoln Trail, we had some weather issues there toward the end of June that kind of put a damper, no pun intended, on things, but footers are now going in there at East Hardin, and pretty soon, hopefully too, you'll start to see it rise out of the ground. But both those projects are moving along nicely, and feel like we got real good competitive bids. I don't know, I think maybe you were there for a bid day, but we had the entire boardroom full of bidders, it was pretty exciting.
And
to
our
see
construction manager, who is a well-seasoned Tommy Gum, he's been around a while, a day or two.
Absolutely.
And he said that was the most he'd ever seen come out for that.
Yeah,
So.
it was fantastic. You know, we're geographically in a pretty nice spot. We can pull from Louisville and Asheville and Lexington, so I think we got some real good competitive bids for both those projects. And both of Tommy's site superintendents have a little gray like I do, so it's always nice to see somebody with some experience out there.
And John, folks are excited about those projects. I mean, folks are excited to see the completion of those buildings. I'm excited that people are excited.
Oh yeah, there's I get stopped from time to time at the store or at a ball game or whatever, and says, hey, when are we going to be able to move in, or when's that going to get done, that sort of thing. So it's always exciting.
All right. Well, John Stith has been our guest here at here on HCS Matters, and we appreciate him and his staff. I mean, there's lots of people under John's mentorship and leadership, and he does a great job, and we appreciate him and appreciate the fine job that he does for our district. So if you want more information on our district, I know we are coming up on you may be watching this even after school has started, and you may have some questions about some school bus times and pickups, or you may have some questions about menus or whatever. You can find all of that information on our district website, which is hardin.kyschools.us. That's hardin.kyschools.us. And also we have some social media outlets. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and even LinkedIn. So you can find us in many ways, but there's a lot of information on our district website. So please go to our website, and maybe you can find that information that you need to get your school year off to a great start. So thank you for watching.